He took the last job on the list, a chauffeur gig no one wanted. The car was sleek, the man inside was cold. But what started as a ride would drive him into the most unexpected and beautiful days of his life. Jack wasn't chasing dreams anymore. He was chasing one more rent payment. At 42, he wasn't a man who complained. He'd spent his entire life with grease under his nails and a wrench in his hand, running the same small-town auto shop his father built from nothing. But lately, nothing was all that was left. His wife had passed quietly 3 winters ago. Cancer doesn't knock when it arrives. It just takes. And so did the bills, one after another. Now it was just him and Lily, 10 years old, full of questions he didn't always know how to answer, and eyes far too hopeful for the kind of world they were living in. He read her stories at night. He skipped dinners he couldn't afford. He told her the lights flickered because of a storm coming, not because he hadn't paid the utility bill in 3 months. That morning, he counted the dollars in his wallet. 7 crumpled bills, not enough gas for another job interview across town, not enough for groceries and rent. So he walked. Through rain, through rejection, through a job center crowded with folded arms and empty eyes. And that's when he saw it. A notice on the board, half torn, barely hanging on. Private driver needed, high pay, discretion required, no experience necessary. The woman behind the counter looked up and scoffed. "Forget that one. Trust me, it's cursed." One of the richest men in the city, cold as stone, fired his last driver for clearing his throat too loud. But Jack didn't flinch. He stared at the ad like he was staring at a life raft. He didn't care about the man in the backseat. He cared about the little girl waiting at home. "I'll take it," he said quietly. No suit, no resume, just worn boots and quiet desperation. And as he walked out, that crumpled job slip in his hand, he thought of Lily's favorite cereal. And how maybe, just maybe, this driver job no one wanted might just be the one thing he needed most. What Jack didn't know was that he wasn't just stepping into a car. He was stepping into the best days of his life. The car was black, sleek, silent, the kind that hummed money even when it wasn't moving. When Jack showed up at the estate, he thought maybe the GPS was wrong. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Iron gates, stone walls, security cameras on all corners. The kind of home that didn't say welcome. It said you don't belong here. But Jack needed the job, so he stepped forward. The front door opened not with warmth, but procedure. A man in a pressed suit handed him keys without even a smile. "Drive, be on time, no talking, no questions, he doesn't like noise." Jack blinked. "Wait, who am I driving?" But the man was already walking away. 5 minutes later, a door in the mansion opened. There he was. Mr. Royce. Tall, polished, cold. 60-something, hair like winter frost, shoes too clean to have ever touched real dirt. He didn't say hello, he didn't look at Jack. He simply opened the door, got into the back of the car, and said 3 words. "Downtown, midtown, back." Jack nodded. And they drove. Through city streets and silver skies, in silence so thick it felt like glass between them. Jack kept his eyes forward, hands at 10 and 2. He didn't ask questions. He didn't play music. He didn't even clear his throat. He just drove. And from the rearview mirror, he noticed something. Mr. Royce didn't look out at the world. He looked through it, as if nothing he saw really touched him. Not the people, the parks, the bustle of a life being lived just beyond the car window. It was like he wasn't really in the world anymore. Like he had left it a long time ago. Hours passed, they returned to the mansion. "Same time tomorrow," Mr. Royce muttered as he stepped out, never once meeting Jack's eyes. Jack nodded again. No thank you, no good night, just footsteps fading behind billion-dollar doors. That night, Jack sat on the edge of Lily's bed, his rough hands still smelling faintly of leather and coffee from the car's cabin. "Did the rich man like you?" she asked, wide-eyed. Jack smiled softly. "He didn't say much." She thought about that, then whispered, "Sometimes people don't talk because they're lonely." Jack looked at her. So young, so small, and somehow so right. He kissed her forehead, tucked her in, and sat by the window long after the lights went out. He'd taken the job to help her. But something about the man in the backseat felt like a puzzle the world had stopped trying to solve. And Jack, he wasn't sure why. But he couldn't stop thinking about him. The week went by like clockwork. Same times, same routes, same silence. Jack drove, Royce sat. No music, no conversation, not even a thank you for opening the door. But Jack had been around long enough to know when silence wasn't just silence. It was armor, thick, polished, and cold to the touch. And sometimes, when Jack glanced in the rearview mirror, he'd catch a flicker of something behind Royce's perfect posture. A slump in his shoulders no money could hide. Not sadness exactly. Deeper. Something like silent grief. It wasn't until the 8th day that something changed. Late evening, light rain tapping against the windshield. Jack was driving Royce back from a midtown meeting. The drive was quiet, as always. The world outside was dark enough that Jack couldn't really see him until he heard it. A small sound. A breath caught in the throat. At first, Jack thought it came from outside, but then he saw it. In the mirror, under the streetlight glow, Royce wiped one hand quickly across his cheek. It wasn't allergy season. It was a tear. But Jack said nothing, because when a man cries in private, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is pretend you didn't see it. The next day, Royce was colder, sharper. He barked when Jack made a left turn to avoid a roadblock downtown. "Where are you going? That's not the route." Jack kept steady. "There's a protest up ahead, full roads blocked. This way saves 10 minutes. Royce glared at him through the rearview mirror as if he were about to fire him on the spot. But then, leaned back in his seat and said no more. That afternoon, when Jack returned home, Lily ran into his arms the moment he opened the door. "Daddy, look," she held up a drawing. "It's us in a big car, and Mr. Fancy Face in the back," she giggled. "You're his superhero." Jack couldn't help but laugh. But later that night, as he stood by the sink washing the 2 cracked dishes they used every night, he caught himself thinking about Royce again. Not about the money, not the car. The man. And whatever pain he was carrying behind those polished shoes and sharp suits. Jack had known grief, real grief. When his wife passed, it felt like the world had been sucked into a vacuum, and grief like that had a way of recognizing its reflection in someone else. Royce was still a mystery, yes, but Jack could see it now. The coldness, the strict rules, the eyes that rarely blinked, all of it wasn't arrogance. It was protection. And while the world only saw a billionaire sealed inside a glass tower, Jack saw something else entirely. A broken man in the backseat, holding on to something or someone he'd never let go of. The silence had a rhythm now. Jack arrived at 6:45 a.m. sharp. Royce stepped into the car at 7:00. His suits changed daily, his mood never did. And Jack, well, he never spoke, not because he was afraid, but because the silence had become sacred. It was the unspoken rule. Then one night, the rule changed. The city was wrapped in fog, thick like soup, and the silence inside the car felt heavier than usual. Jack was driving the long way home, Royce's usual request when meetings ran late. He said the longer drive helped him think. But tonight, Royce wasn't thinking. He was staring. Out the tinted windows, eyes flicking across half-faded neon signs and couples huddled under umbrellas. Faces enjoying cheap slices of pizza and laughter he hadn't tasted in years. Then, out of nowhere, his voice broke the quiet. "Why'd you take this job?" Jack almost thought he imagined it. "Sir," he replied cautiously, unsure if Royce had even meant to speak aloud. Royce didn't look at him. He just repeated the question, quieter this time, like the words hurt coming out. "Why'd you take this job?" Jack's hands tightened slightly on the wheel, eyes focused. But in his heart, something shifted. "Daughter, 10 years old," Jack said after a beat. "There weren't many jobs left, and I couldn't let her see me fail." Royce didn't respond. But Jack could see movement in the mirror. Royce had gone still. His jaw relaxed, his eyes lost in a memory none of them could see. No more words were exchanged. But the next morning, something strange happened. Waiting on the rear passenger seat, right where Jack usually left the day's itinerary, was something small, clean, new. A hardcover book. Its title, Raising Strong Daughters. Jack stared at it for a long time, then opened it. Inside the cover, in elegant black ink, one quiet sentence. "She's lucky to have a father like you." No name, no greeting, just that. Royce didn't mention it when he got in the car. He didn't even look over. But for the first time since Jack had known him, the silence didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a door, just barely unlocked. A billionaire can build walls to keep the world out. But sometimes, all it takes is a single, honest answer to remind him he's still human. It started like any other morning. Jack pulled the car around precisely at 6:59. Black coat, black tie, fresh coffee in the thermos, same roots, same rhythm. But this time, Mr. Royce got in with a strange energy. Not rushed, not stiff. He simply said, "We're going somewhere different today." No explanation, no paperwork, just an address handwritten on a folded piece of thick cream paper. Jack glanced at it. It wasn't a business tower or boardroom. It was across the river, quiet, tucked away. An address that didn't belong to money or power. It belonged to something older. As they drove, Royce hardly shifted. He stared straight ahead, resting a trembling finger against his lips. Jack didn't speak. He knew better. But deep inside, something told him this wasn't a meeting about stocks or subsidiaries. When they arrived, it was clear this wasn't an office. It was a private wing of a hospital few people even knew existed. Elegant, isolated, a place built for privacy, maybe even for secrets. Royce stepped out slowly. His shoulders, once square and proud, now hunched slightly. Jack stayed with the car. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No phone calls, no messages, just quiet. But through the tall windows, Jack could just make out Royce standing in a room. Alone, motionless, his back to the door. His hand pressed gently against the glass. Next to him on the bed was a young man. Mid-20s, wires and monitors everywhere, motionless, pale. Unmoving. Something inside Jack's chest tightened, and even though the world looked still, he felt like he was witnessing something sacred. Later, as Royce returned, his eyes were raw, his voice softer. "Thank you, Jack," he said quietly. It was the first time he'd said his name. Jack didn't reply. In that moment, he knew. If Royce had wanted to explain, he would have. But then, something unexpected. A nurse, early 40s, kind face, walked up to Jack as he was opening the door for Royce. Keeping her voice low, she murmured, "You must be the new driver. He hasn't brought anyone here before." Jack glanced at her. She offered a sad smile. "That's his son, been in a coma for 2 years, car accident. They had a fight that night, words were said. Things broke. Then..." She shrugged, but the word she didn't say hung in the air like smoke. Crash. Jack's heart dropped. Suddenly, everything made sense. The silence, the rules, the coldness, the grief in Royce's eyes. He wasn't just a busy billionaire. He was a father frozen in guilt. Driving every morning through a life, he stopped living the night his son closed his eyes. Jack didn't say a word on the way back, and neither did Royce. Because now, their silence had a weight, a knowing, a thread between two men who had both lost too much. And this time, Jack wasn't just taking him somewhere. He was walking beside him, even if it was still in silence. It wasn't spoken. There was no single moment when Royce turned to Jack and said, "I trust you now." But something shifted. The silences weren't as sharp anymore. The air in the car didn't feel so brittle. A glance in the rearview mirror now and then, a nod of acknowledgement, a moment of stillness that somehow felt less heavy. Jack started doing the little things. A second cup of coffee placed into the holder by Royce's seat, black, no sugar, exactly how he always ordered it at the corner cafe he thought no one noticed. A quiet jazz playlist, barely audible through the speakers on slower evening drives. Songs Jack had noticed Royce didn't turn off the one time they accidentally played. He started keeping tissues folded neatly in the glove box. He never said why. And Royce, well, he never thanked him. But one morning, Jack stepped outside his apartment building and froze. His car, the one he'd been driving Royce around in day and night, now had 4 brand new tires. Premium, quiet ride, worth more than Jack's rent. No note, no explanation. Just a silent upgrade from a man who noticed, even when it seemed like he didn't. A few days later, in the thick of traffic, Royce was scrolling through his tablet when he looked up and said, "Do you have kids? You said daughter, right?" Jack nodded. "Lily, 10, loves science more than cartoons. I think she's gonna build rockets one day." Royce didn't smile, but his voice softened. "That's good, give her space. Let her be loud and curious. You only get one ride like that." It was one of the longest things he'd ever said. And right then, Jack understood. This wasn't just a man who had lost a son. This was a man still trying to be a father in a world where it felt too late. That night, as Jack pulled into the driveway of Royce's sprawling estate, neither man said goodbye. But as Royce stepped out, he paused. Just for a second. "Tomorrow, don't be late," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. Jack nodded, hiding a grin. In most jobs, that would sound like a command. But here, it sounded almost like a routine. Like trust. He wasn't just the driver anymore. He was the only one left that Royce allowed in his world. A quiet man in the front seat, and a broken father in the back. Neither of them saying much, but both reaching, gently, for something more than this strange silence between them. It was never supposed to rain that night. Clear skies in the forecast, not a cloud in sight when they left the hospital. Jack had waited outside while Royce visited his son. Same as always. He didn't ask questions, didn't peek into that world. He only waited, quietly, patiently, like a friend who knew some doors needed to be opened only from the inside. By the time Royce came out, the clouds had changed. Thick, low, heavy with something more than water. They were halfway across the bridge when the tire blew. A loud snap, sharp pull. Jack gripped the wheel and brought the car to a clean stop on the narrow shoulder of the empty road. No panic, just muscle memory. Royce looked up from his phone, startled. "Is everything?" "Tire," Jack cut in calmly. "Give me 5 minutes." He pulled over, turned on the flashers, and stepped out into the wind, reaching for the spare. Rain started to fall, then pour. But Jack didn't ask for help. He didn't complain. He just got on one knee and went to work, hands to the pavement. shirt soaked to the bone. And for the first time since they met, Royce stepped out of the car. No umbrella, no plan, just stood there watching. 50 yards from the edge of the city. A billionaire standing in the rain, in silence, beside a man he hadn't spoken more than 20 words to. Then the sky cracked open. Thunder in the distance, lightning behind the skyline. Jack tightened the final lug nut, stood up, wiping his hands. "You're soaked," Royce said, voice quieter than the rain around them. Jack shrugged. "She's been through worse," he smiled, patting the hood. Then, out of nowhere, Royce spoke again. But this time, he didn't talk about the route, or time, or files. He talked about the night everything changed. "I told him to grow up, to stop disappointing me. He slammed the door when he left. I didn't follow, didn't even call him back." Jack stood still. 5 hours later, the phone rang. They said he wrapped his car around a telephone pole, just like that. His voice cracked. "I had money, connections, I couldn't save him." There was a long pause, just wind. Rain, no sympathy needed, no advice offered. Then Jack nodded, slowly. "I lost my wife to cancer. One night, Lily came in the bedroom thinking I had fallen asleep, caught me crying with her teddy bear in my hands." He exhaled, long and slow, like he'd been holding that in for years. "We all lose things, but we don't lose everything. Not unless we give up what's still left." Royce looked at him. Not as a billionaire, but as a father. As a man drowning in guilt, finding his way back to shore. And in that moment, two strangers stood in the rain. No walls, no roles, no rules. Just the fragile, aching truth between them. That no matter how much money you have, some things, some wounds, only start to heal when we stop pretending we're whole. The next morning dawned clear, as if the sky itself were embarrassed by how hard it had cried the night before. Jack arrived at the estate early, coffee steaming in the passenger holder, raincoat drying on the seatback hook. He expected the routine. Royce would step out, nod once, glide into the back seat. But today the front door opened wider than usual, and the butler simply said, "Mr. Royce would like a word. Inside." Jack hesitated on the marble threshold. The foyer looked like something out of a museum, oil paintings, chandeliers, floors polished enough to see your doubts in them. He wiped his boots instinctively, suddenly aware of every scratch on the leather. Royce appeared at the end of the hall. No suit jacket, no tie, just a simple gray sweater that somehow made the mansion feel smaller. "Breakfast," he said, almost awkwardly. "Figured you might be hungry." It wasn't a command, it was an invitation. They ate at a table meant for 20, two places set side by side. Silver lids lifted to reveal ordinary food, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, strawberries sliced the way kids like them. Jack recognized the spread. This was the menu of a man who once fed a family, not a boardroom. They ate mostly in silence, but it was a different silence, comfortable, like two engines idling at the same rhythm. Every so often Royce would glance over, as though checking to see if Jack was really there or just a mirage the storm had blown in. When they finished, Royce cleared his throat. I installed those tires because you keep me safe. Figured I could try doing the same." Jack smiled. "Thank you, they ride smooth." Royce nodded, then took a breath that seemed to carry months of weight. "I'd like to meet your daughter," he said. "Maybe bring her by this Saturday. The garden's in bloom. She might like the koi pond." Jack froze. In all his years of scraping by, no one had ever offered Lily a garden, much less a pond. "That would mean a lot," he answered, voice thick. Royce looked relieved, almost shy. "Good, Saturday then." As Jack turned to leave, Royce called after him, "Jack." "Yes, sir." Royce's gaze softened. "Don't call me sir, just Royce." Jack nodded once, heart thudding like a boy receiving his first real handshake. Outside, he climbed into the driver's seat. The sun glinted off those brand new tires, and for the first time since he'd taken this job, Jack didn't feel like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. He felt strangely, like he'd just been welcomed home. Saturday arrived like a postcard, sky washed clean, sunlight sliding across the city's windows. Jack and Lily stood at the mansion gates, small hands clasped in big calloused ones. The guard waved them through with a grin that shocked Jack. Even the staff could feel the weather changing inside these walls. Lily's sneakers squeaked on the marble as she craned her neck to take everything in. Royce met them in the foyer, no sweater this time, just rolled up sleeves and a nervous half-smile, the kind a kid wears on his first day of school. "Miss Lily," he said, offering a tiny bow, "the koi are waiting." They strolled through blooming roses and wisteria so heavy it perfumed the air. Lily knelt beside the pond, scattering pellets while jewel-bright fish rippled the water. Royce crouched too, trousers be damned, pointing out a white koi with an orange heart on its head. "That one's name is Melody," he whispered. Lily giggled, and the sound cracked something open in him. Jack saw it, a light, faint but definite, flickering behind Royce's guarded eyes. The afternoon bled effortlessly into evening. Royce showed Lily the greenhouse, handed her a packet of seeds for your rocket science garden, and listened, really listened, as she explained why sunflowers always turn their faces. When it was time to leave, Lily hugged him without hesitation. Royce stiffened at first, then wrapped both arms around this fearless little girl as though she were made of glass and gold. "See you next Saturday, Mr. Royce," she chirped. He cleared his throat. Call me Arthur." Jack drove home awash in gratitude, so large it barely fit in the car. 2 weeks later came Lily's school recital, an auditorium smelling of fresh paint and parental nerves. Jack sat in the third row, program trembling in his hands. He'd invited Royce but tried not to hope. Billionaires had empires to run. 5 minutes before the lights dimmed, the back doors opened. In walked Arthur Royce, no entourage, no announcement. Just a modest navy blazer and a single sunflower in his fist. Whispers rippled through the rows as he slid into the empty seat beside Jack. "I promised her," he murmured. The curtain rose. Tiny musicians filed out like ducklings. When Lily stepped to center stage, violin tucked beneath her chin, Jack felt his pulse in his throat. She found her father, then spotted Royce. Her grin was big enough to fill the room. The bow touched string, a clear, trembling note soared, then another, weaving into what a wonderful world. Halfway through, Jack risked a glance sideways. Royce was crying. Not the silent, hidden tears Jack had glimpsed weeks ago, but open, unabashed streams that caught the stage lights. And underneath the tears, there it was. A smile. Wide, uneven, beautiful. The billionaire nobody could reach was smiling at a world he'd sworn he was done with. When the final note quivered into silence, the audience erupted. Jack stood, clapping until his palms stung. Royce rose too, sunflower pressed to his chest like a pledge. Backstage, Lily barreled into them. Royce knelt, presenting the flower. "For the brightest sunflower I know," he said, voice shaking. Lily beamed. "Did I play okay?" Royce's answer was simple. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, then looked at Jack. "Your daughter reminded me life still has music." Jack swallowed hard. "She reminds me every day." The three of them lingered there in the hallway glow, driver, billionaire, child, an unlikely chord finally resolving into perfect harmony. And somewhere deep inside Arthur Royce, a door that had rusted shut 2 years ago swung wide, letting the world back in on a single, glorious smile. Spring turned to summer, and the mansion felt different now, windows thrown open, laughter echoing down hallways that once held only footsteps and echoes. Jack still arrived at 6:59, but these days Royce often met him outside, coffee in hand, ready to ride up front instead of hiding in the back. Then, on a golden Tuesday morning, the call came. Jack had just parked when Royce's phone rang. He froze, listening, color draining from his face, then filling back in like sunrise. He met Jack's eyes, breathless. "He's awake," Royce whispered. "My boy, he's awake." They didn't take the town car. Jack broke every speed limit in Royce's vintage roadster, engine roaring like caged joy. At the hospital door, Royce paused, gripping Jack's shoulder. No words, just gratitude pulsing through a single squeeze. Inside, the room was filled with soft beeps and the impossible. Royce's son, eyes open, tracking the light, whispered, "Dad." Royce collapsed into the chair, tears falling freely. "I'm here, I never left." The young man's hand slipped into his, fragile yet unmistakably alive. In the doorway, Jack felt his own knees weaken. He stepped back to give them space, but Royce called him in. "This is Jack," he told his son. "He reminded me how to stay." Weeks passed. Rehab sessions, late-night conversations, second chances sprouting like wildflowers. One evening, Royce invited Jack and Lily to a backyard barbecue, casual, smoky, utterly ordinary in the most extraordinary way. The billionaire flipped burgers while Lily taught his recovering son how to launch paper rockets off the patio railing. Jack watched, arms crossed, heart so full it ached. Royce joined him, apron splattered, face glowing in fire pit light. "Funny," he said. "All the money in the world and the richest I've ever felt is right now." Jack smiled. Sometimes the road leads you someplace better than the map. Royce nodded toward Lily, spinning in the grass. And sometimes the driver is the real navigator. They clinked soda cans in a quiet toast. Two fathers, two survivors, two men no longer defined by what they lost, but by what they found in each other. Voiceover slows, music swells. In the end, it wasn't the mansion or the money that changed Jack's life. It was a job no one wanted, a silence that begged to be understood, and the stubborn kindness of two hearts refusing to give up. Because a steering wheel can point you toward a destination, but compassion can steer you toward your destiny. Remember, status may separate us, but humanity stitches us back together. So open the door, offer the ride, and meet the world with gentle eyes. The life you change just might be your own.